Hello, and welcome back to Norrin Reads. In today's episode, I will be reviewing Silver Surfer number 12 from the 1987 series. This issue was written by Steve Englehart, penciled and colored by Marshall Rogers, and inked by Joe Rubinstein. This issue is entitled Sick, and it begins with the Silver Surfer in a containment field. He has been taken prisoner by who is revealed to be Reptyl, the non-human, who showed up in a teaser at the end of the last issue. One of Reptyl's crewmen is questioning what he has done with the Silver Surfer, and the Reptyl explains that the Silver Surfer as well as Nova now power his main ships. He has attached them to their engines, and he is using their power cosmic to power his ships. We learn through this discussion with this crewman that Reptyl really hates human beings, and he doesn't really differentiate them. He sees them all as the same. So whether or not they're human beings or they're just humanoids, he sees them all the same and he hates them all. During this conversation, this crewman who's talking to him questions him if he's concerned about what Galactus will do. And Reptyl responds that the coal sack is vast, but there aren't really any planets in the coal sack, so Galactus really has no reason to come there, so he's not worried. The Contemplator arrives saying, "You really do hate us, don't you?" And him and the Contemplator get into this discussion about evolution and how things have played out in history. The Contemplator and Reptyl were both born in the coal sack, so there's this kinship between them. The Contemplator's people were born about 5 billion years prior to the Reptyl's race being born in the coal sack, and they left the coal sack, not returning. And because of this, the Reptyl's race was able to grow strong because they were left alone, they were left isolated. Unlike the Reptyls on Earth, which the Contemplator mentions, the dinosaurs who evolved but eventually were destroyed. I find this conversation important and interesting because it calls back to what Nova and Surfer discussed in the previous issue about how many humanoids there were, how many humanoid species they'd seen throughout the galaxy. So I thought it worth mentioning. While the Reptyl and Contemplator are having this discussion, we flash over to the Surfer, who is still being drained of his energy, and he is trying to resist it, but he cannot, and he keeps falling back to sleep. The Reptyl and Contemplator finish their conversation with the Reptyl saying, "Galactus and his pawns will never get to you past me, Contemplator." They depart, and we see a plant behind them that has been in the room the whole time. It senses what they've said, and it sends a message across space to the Kotati. The Kotati know that the Silver Surfer is an ally of Hawkeye, who was on the Avengers team with the Swordsman, who was the husband of Mantis, the Celestial Madonna. So they're discussing whether or not they should help him. They realize that they can't just help every ally of an ally, especially since they're not really powerful physical beings. They're these thin, leafy humanoids, and they have focused more on growing themselves mentally. So they want to help, but they realize that they're not well suited for it, but they understand how much the Silver Surfer meant to Mantis, so it seems as though they're going to help. Meanwhile, the pirates are partying it up, drinking, reveling, having a good time. The pirate who hit on Nova shows up in the bar. He's tripped by another one of these pirates, and he says, "Watch it, Clumsy." And he explains to this woman next to him, he says that's his name actually, Clumsy. So Clumsy walks up to the table where he was just tripped, and he talks to the girl. He says, "Hey, my name's Clumsy Foul Up, wanna dance?" And of course he leans on the table and it breaks, proving he is this Clumsy Foul Up guy. They offer him drink and this green leaf. They say, "Hey man, let's party, have a drink, have some of this." And he's like, "Sure, hey, it is a party, let's do it." Shortly after Clumsy Foul Up eats that leaf, the room starts spinning and things get very strange and trippy for him, and he starts hearing a voice calling to him. It mentions Nova, that flame woman that he coveted. It tells him, "You need to rescue her." And he starts to resist, but they're like, "No, you remember her, Nova, the flame woman. They're stealing her flame. They're draining her. And you're the only person that can help her." And he's still resisting. He's worried what the captain will do. Meanwhile, the pirates are realizing he's sort of talking to himself, and they're just trying to calm him down, and he bashes them all away. And then we cut to the Contemplator, who is mid-meditation. His eyes open, and he says, "The Kotati." He realizes that the Kotati are involved, and they are going to try to save Nova and the Silver Surfer. So instead of running to warn Captain Reptyl, because he's not a physically adept fellow, he uses his astral form to go and warn the captain. And there's this shield around Reptyl's room. He can't get in, so he has to talk to this guard. The guard resists letting him in because he didn't hear an alarm. He doesn't believe there's a real threat, so this is severely slowing down the Contemplator. We see Nova now for the first time. She is in another ship. She is in the engine room being drained just like the Silver Surfer is, and she feels sick. She feels like she's going to vomit just like the Surfer, and she feels like she has a fever, and she's the Flame Woman, so she kind of makes this joke to herself. And after that she thinks, "You give me fever, Silverado baby." So perhaps there are love feelings for the Silver Surfer from Nova. Her mind sort of wanders after this, and she sees a wounded Kree talking to Nenora, the leader of the Kree, saying that the Silver Surfer attacked and destroyed their outpost. And Nenora responds, "Death to the Silver Surfer." And we see Nenora in her Skrull form. We see her true form, and we also see the Surfer, this maniacal character, attacking and destroying things. So it seems as though Nova's having a fever dream, or is it the Kotati communicating the truth to her? Because she's seeing things that only we as the reader know. So this is an interesting sort of vision she has, and I know it's going to be important later. Clumsy arrives and he saves Nova. He shuts down this beam that's draining her energy, and he pulls her out of this chamber, and right after that he passes out. Nova takes a moment and gathers herself and realizes what's happened, that her and the Surfer have been captured. Meanwhile, Captain Reptyl is woken by his guard. He is angry because this guard broke protocol. He's not supposed to be bothered during his sleep cycle, and he's not happy about it. While they're arguing over this, the alarm of the ship starts ringing because Nova has escaped. She is now outside attacking the ship. Reptyl gets up to the bridge and gets an assessment of what's happening, and they inform him that they still have the Silver Surfer. So he orders them to use the Surfer and his energies through the ship to attack Nova. While they're using his energy to attack Nova, we see him in this corner of the panel in the chamber being drained of his life force as his energy is being used to harm Nova. Nova realizes what's happening, and it's difficult for her at first because she knows how powerful the Surfer is, but she is also powerful. She's a living sun, and she psychs herself up. She realizes that she can control every photon of her flame, so she creates this flame trail by flying around the ship, and she contracts it around the ship. Reptyl understands that he's not going to be able to fight her off at this point, and it's part of the pirate tactic to survive. They fight and they flee. They're not soldiers, so he jettisons the Silver Surfer into space to get Nova to stop the attack. Nova goes to the Surfer floating in space while the pirates retreat, and there are also pirates from the destroyed ship floating around in spacesuits, and one of them is Clumsy Foul-Up, and he says, "Flame Dame, I won't forget ya. You betcha." Back on the ship, Contemplator is talking to Reptyl. He's saying, we'll be safe in the coal sack. There's so many places for us to hide. And suddenly Reptyl lunges and bites the Contemplator in the neck, and he begins to devour him. As Reptyl's chewing him up, he says, "You were too smart, Contemplator. You knew too much with your elder's mind for me to let you roam loose anymore. Besides, you're a whole lot of meat." And a couple of Reptyl's crewmen are watching this. One vomits and the other says, "Now that's sick." Next, the second Silver Surfer. I enjoyed this issue quite a bit, as I have been enjoying most of these issues. I think that the writing is really consistent and it's consistently interesting. I particularly enjoy the idea of using Surfer and Nova to power the ships. Really clever and really evil, giving us a good insight into the Reptyl. He clearly does hate humanoids. If he's going to just use them as batteries, essentially drain them of their life essence and leave them in this state of perpetual pain, pretty maniacal, pretty evil. So I really appreciate that character and what he's done and the creative ideas. It was interesting to get a look at the Kotati. As I recall, this is the first time we've seen them physically in this series, and it's just interesting to see that portrayed. I have a lot of questions surrounding that fever dream or vision that Nova had concerning the Silver Surfer and the double Silver Surfer who attacked the Kree, and the fact that she saw Nenora as a Skrull. I'm really wondering if that was the Kotati contacting her, or how she was able to see those things. I'm interested to see how that plays out. I like the ruthlessness of Reptyl, as I said before. In particular, how he just decided to kill the Contemplator. He said he did it because the Contemplator knew too much. I'm wondering if it's actually because he truly feared Galactus, especially now that Nova and the Surfer were free. I'm wondering if he did that to maybe get Galactus off of his tail. But once again, the issue asks questions I want to see answered and is keeping me engaged and interested in this cosmic tale. So again, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you out there in the cosmic spaceways.